Hey everyone, today I'm talking more about the upcoming Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. A few weeks ago, a video was put out with a couple of the creators specifically talking about narrative and role playing in the game. And since this is a Vampire the Masquerade game, that is 90 to 95% what I actually care about. The trailer that we saw last really focused on combat, which I can understand because it's hard to make an interesting trailer with a bunch of, talent trees and dialogue options. But also, that's not what I'm here for. So I was excited when they were going to put out this video. So I thought I would just sort of watch through it and comment on it as it goes. There we go. All right, let's go.
Good evening, Kindred, and welcome to this Halloween special where we are going to give you what you want. You will get Bloodlines 2 sneak previews. We will talk about character. We will talk about narrative. We will talk to the Chinese room.
Definitely.
Hello, folks. I'm Ian.
Got
I'm
my
narrative director
camera in the
of
wrong
Chinese
spot.
Room.
There we go.
I've been in video
I'll
games
sit
for
in the
about
middle
20
here.
years and film and TV, spending a lot of time around detective stories and horror. In particular, you might have played Amnesia Rebirth, which I was story lead for. But
This
tonight we're going to be
is
talking
one
about
of the
something
leads
a
of
bit
the
different.
Chinese
We're gonna
room,
be
who
looking
is
slightly into the future.
making the new.
And I'm Sean Graney, Executive
I'm
Vice
just
President
a
for
mess.
World
Okay,
of
let's go over
Darkness
here.
at Paradox Interactive. I've been with this project since 2017. I've been working with
So,
all of our World of Darkness
This does look
projects,
like it's going to be a
and I
fairly
got
chill
into
conversation
Vampire the Masquerade at a very
about what's
uncomfortably
coming
early
in the
age,
game.
and it's been with me since then.
Yeah, I
They've
spent
got the
most
rule
of
book in the
early
background,
90s
which is
with
nice. I
Vampire
hope
First and
that they're
Second
making
Edition, and I
good
still
use of that as
So,
they're
Why
developing and
don't
writing the
we
game,
get to what the
especially.
people want and
Yeah.
take a look at our character?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to look at a short video now, and we're going to step into the future.
I really don't want you to forget that this
2024,
game
around
takes
about
place in
Christmas,
Seattle.
Glacier Hotel
And
in
it's Christmas
Seattle,
time.
and watch our lead character meet somebody.
She didn't murder you, so that's a start. So then, you have me at a disadvantage.
No, there's
I assume,
Lou.
of
That's a
course,
character
you
that
know
was
who I am.
in the trailers for
So
the
question is,
original version of
who are you?
Bloodlines 2
You can
that was
call me
coming out.
Fire. I seek an audience with the Prince of Seattle.
Fire.
I've been led to believe you can help.
That's
How
kind of a silly name.
delicious.
A silly
Where could you
vampire name,
possibly
which kind of
walk with
fits,
our
but
beloved prince?
That's my business.
Now, Fire, that is not a fair exchange. You came to me.
keep moving my
Do
camera
try and
around.
play along, darling. It's so boring otherwise. Let's try again. Who are you, really?
Someone rudely
Right, so
awoken from a
couple
100-year sleep,
options
covered
seen
in
there in
thin
terms
blood
of
vampire,
dialogue.
with this mark on my hand and no
They
explanation
mostly look
why.
like
I want
the
answers.
way
Well, if
you want the
that's all
conversation
you
to go as
wanted,
opposed to
why
like
didn't you just
clever
say,
dialogue
So
options,
that's it? You'll help?
which
And now
not
what you've seen is truly a
super
sneak peek.
stoked
We
about.
are post-alpha, but this is game development. So certain sections may change. Certain sections may remain exactly the same. Who did we just meet?
So we met two people there. We met the person who we were talking to there is a character called Lou, who, if anybody knows anything about Seattle, they may be able to figure out who that is. Our protagonist.
So I'm just going to pause that for a second there. Lou, yeah, as I mentioned, was in the previous trailers. I think it's Lou Grand, who is a character from Vampire the Masquerade lore, which was part of the Camarilla. Was the Prince of Seattle at one point. I don't think is anymore. Also, she might be based on a real life person called Lou Graham, who was a madam in Seattle early days.
One version of our protagonist you saw there is a character we call Fire. Fire is an elder kindred. Fire has been asleep for around 100 years and just woken up into modern day or slightly near future Seattle. And there are huge consequences to dropping an elder into a kindred city. Most games, we play a newbie. In all sorts of different RPGs, we play a newbie who's learning the ropes of the world. Fire is different. Fire is old, experienced. She's a hunter. She's a stalker. She knows how to be a vampire. but she doesn't know the current day situation and how her actions are going to affect the world.
So I do like that. I mentioned that I liked how you played an elder vampire. It seemed to make more sense in terms of just, how powerful you're probably going to end up by the end of the game. I feel like mechanically it's not going to be that different because, as you said, she's not going to know like modern day things, even if she knows a lot more of the vampire politics and she's much more powerful in that way.
So you're talking about how we're inverting the kind of RPG journey here. How is the Chinese room handling that from a game development and design perspective?
Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting things going on here. So firstly, it's the normal journey of an RPG character to gain power over time, but we're starting with a certain level of power here. You have impact
Yeah,
from
like
the very
that.
beginning. Fire isn't at her full power, hasn't recovered it yet, and there are constraints that we don't want to spoil that mean she is effectively bound. She's in a bad situation. You may have seen that mark on her hand.
Does anyone recognize that
is a
mark?
puzzle for her.
I
It's a
don't
problem for her. It's
particularly.
something she's trying to solve.
Maybe
So
it's in the
player
rule book
journey, the
somewhere. It's
character
been mentioned
journey,
somewhere.
is about regaining and possibly exceeding what she once was, and having making a big change to Seattle for reasons which I hope will become clear.
So this is the inverse of Bloodlines 1 in some ways. In Bloodlines 1, you awake as a fairly
Oops.
important vampire. You are used as a pawn by a number of different LA vampires. Here we'll be awaking as an elder in Seattle, trying to get their bearings, I'm assuming.
So, again, I like it narratively. I like the sort of, oh, you've just woken up. Oh, you've got some kind of amnesia. I don't know. So many of my favorite RPGs do that, from Planescape Torment or Disco Elysium, where you have to sort of regain your bearings, figure out who you are, use your power. Although I think generally narratively it kind of turns out the same way, whether you're just a fledgling vampire who all of a sudden the prince is using to do all of his dirty work, or whether you have some power yourself, you end up being a very important character, whether, regardless of how you start out. But I do like this approach.
Yeah, that's right. So this isn't a blank slate of a character. It's worth saying. Obviously, you can customize it. There'll be a choice of clans. There'll be a choice of outfits, a choice of gender.
I really
and
like
as the
that
gameplay goes
coat
through,
in the middle there.
It's up to you.
I want it.
Elements of her background are up to you to choose, and what she reveals to other people, and what story she's telling, whether she's telling them a fantasy or whether she's telling them the truth. But it's
So there is
there's a
some
certain
character
commonality, which
customization,
is
at
she
least.
stepped into a place she doesn't know and she can't
In terms of look.
grasp it. At a time she doesn't know and can grasp. So, like the protagonist of Bloodlines 1, she will have to learn what the situation is, who the major personalities are, and how she can deal with them.
But how does this not all come apart when she opens a laptop or sees a pedestrian crossing?
She doesn't understand the modern world, but as you may have seen in that last video, she's not entirely alone. The Mark has done something very strange to her. She doesn't understand it at the start of the game, but she is hearing another voice.
Yeah, they mentioned having
a
voice
Fabian.
in her head.
Fabian is a modern
Fabian.
vampire from Seattle. He has ended up inside Fire in a way that
Hot.
will be explained in the gameplay.
Probably not that way.
And he is trapped inside her. She is trapped with him. The two together have to navigate their way through this world. They may hate each other. They may grow to like each other. They may.
I like
carry
having a
on hating
little
each other all the way through, but they
companion,
are
even if it's in your
bound
head.
Together. He has an idea.
I like
about
when
how
your
modern
character
things
can
work.
kind
He
of
doesn't have the
bounce
experience
ideas
of
off
Fire
other
versus
characters
society,
who are just
but he's
always
got
with
a
them,
pretty
whether
good
it's
view,
a
so he can
companion
help
or
her. He can guide her.
someone in your head. I
through
like that
Seattle.
idea.
He can also, because he is a thin blood, he has access to things and an understanding of things that the elder vampire doesn't. So really,
I think that'll also be a really good way to bring in new players into the game, because you'll have the sort of back and forth between these two, one who has an understanding of, power, one who has an understanding of modern day. They can talk to each other. They can get new players caught up on the Masquerade and the Camarilla and the Anarchs and all of the goings on with the vampires.
really, this is the story of the two of them and how they navigate their way through this situation and how they affect Seattle.
will there be an ongoing evolution in our relationships with these characters, and can we affect that?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, that's the meat of the game for Fire, is that she is having to deal with a society of kindred, and she has to decide how to deal with them because they all have different objectives, different goals, and a different relationship to Fire. It's unlike the sort of game where you might play a Paragon or a Renegade or a light side or a dark side. Because Fire has to look at each person individually and figure out how to work with them, how to deal with them. Whether she goes,
So
I am an elder, you have to do what I say, or whether she tries to court them.
That's
whether
good.
she
I
is
hope that
more
there's
insightful about what's going on.
lots of character
All those
relationships to
are
be
different.
juggling
People
and
treat her
reacting to in
differently
different
because
ways.
she treats them
Hopefully, there's a
differently.
lot of
And then
role
the
playing
core
in that
feature of all
aspect of
this
things.
will be the relationship between her and Fabian. The two are caught together. Fire is the only person who can hear Fabian. Fabian can't interact with anybody else. He sees everything that she does, and he sees how she treats other people. So that long-term relationship really is the heart of this story.
And for fans of Bloodlines 1 and Vampire the Masquerade as a franchise, what will Fabian offer as far as feeding back that kind of information to the player?
Well, the two talk through the whole game, and then as the story develops, the effects that she has and the effects that Fabian has on her, really, she's an elder vampire. She spent a lot of time not really thinking about humans
I'd
as
like
anything
to
other
hear
than
more
prey,
about the
really.
role
She's
playing,
distanced
other than
from
this
that. In the same way
central
that we as
relationship.
players are often quite distanced from violence in games and from
Like
the strange
plans
in
or
games. Fabian is
talents
much
or
more grounded. He's much more human.
that kind of stuff.
And really, we're playing off the contrast between the two, the contrast between the elder and the younger, the contrast between the olden times and the new times, and how the two interact. So he's very much an anchor for her, I think it's fair to say, and very much a compass for her if she chooses to pay attention to him.
And so for fans of the IP and also the original game, Fabian will sort of play this role of explaining to the character how humane they are.
I guess that's part of it. Yeah, Fabian's got many roles. He's a very rounded character. It's also worth bearing in mind that it's not just going to be fans of
finding out who this Fabian ends up being,
so,
and why he's stuck inside
new
Fire.
Players are going to want to learn about the world. Fabian knows about some of it. Fire knows about a lot more of it. But the way the two talk about it and the way the two discuss it will help us open that window into a world and tutorialize it to a certain extent, I think. And also how the powers work and how powers
tutorializing
somebody needs to know that stuff, and some players
it's a good
won't.
approach for it, I think.
And so the interplay between the two characters helps us with that.
So Fabian sounds like a very interesting character. How will players be able to customize their narrative experience with Fire as the protagonist?
Tell us.
So, as we talked about earlier, you have options. You have clan choices that affects, for example, the powers that you have. Although, again, the story gives us a bit more opportunity to play around with that. It's a bit more flexible because of the presence of things like thin bloods.
Interesting.
There's the interactivity with all the characters you talk to, the choices you make with those characters. And then there's the wider city, Seattle itself, and how Fire...
Why haven't you mentioned a talent tree?
With the citizens
Give me talents,
of Seattle.
please.
And as a predator, there are times when she is going to want to gain power from some of the citizens and hunt. And this will affect how Fire's powers can change as the game changes. And that depends on how she treats those citizens. If she approaches them as a bully, trying to push them into a certain reaction, then that might work. That might not work.
I want to see some seduction and dominating people.
How she looks. If she's dressed as one type of character, somebody may have a very different reaction to her.
Ooh, I like when dressing different ways impacts things, like they do in the new Sherlock
games. It sounds like you're hinting at a system that we have in Vampire the Masquerade, resonance, which is the emotional state of
resonance.
Of dinner, essentially.
That was also going to be part of
absolutely. It's important
the first iteration of Bloodlines 2.
What the resonance of the character she's feeding on is.
She can sort of take in certain aspects based on who she's feeding on.
As I said, depends how you're dressed, depends who the character is and what they feel about how you've approached them.
Players will have options to choose outfits, and those
Yes.
outfits will have a narrative and dialogue impact.
Yes, absolutely.
I like
true.
that.
People will recognize you as a different thing depending on what you're wearing.
Very, very cool.
Awesome.
So let us return to Seattle and another sneak peek.
All
It's you.
right.
The Nomad.
Willem, I take it. You had some interesting
Willem.
guests outside. Expecting trouble?
So the
Not
protagonist
depends.
is voiced,
Why-
which is interesting.
Why are you here?
I always have
Earlier
mixed thoughts on
tonight,
that.
Another kindred by the name of Isabella used this mark to sap my power. Do you know anything about it?
No. All I had to do was keep my head down for just a few more nights. He's hiding something.
Oh, there's Fabian talking to you.
Tell me, Willem, what rumors have you heard about me?
That you were there in Cairo. They called you the Slayer.
I have been many things to many people. And what will I be to you, Willem?
Can be harder
Into this
to
lonely, forgotten
role play with a
wilds.
voiced
Exactly
character,
what he said
especially
to
when the
me.
dialogue
Guess that
options
makes it
aren't
easier.
actually like
Makes what easier?
giving a
What happens
tone
next?
of response.
So vampires aren't traditionally paragons of truth. And I think here when we're talking to Willem, we can see that Fire is more interested in pushing her agenda than necessarily being completely accurate about her biography. So what do these kinds of decisions mean for the
No, those were
dialogue
apparently
and
pre-alpha,
the
but
story arc?
I'm
If you
super
decide
impressed
to
with
tell
the
Willem about your killer
conversation
reputation versus taking
presentation.
another route.
Maybe
So
Baldur's Gate has
this is one of the advantages.
spoiled
of
us a
being
little
alone.
there,
You
but
have a history. You've been heard of before. Fire it has this legend associated. There are several legends, a whole collection of legends. Which of those are true is, to a certain extent, a decision for the player. We're leaving that deliberately. Was she at
I
this
like
particular
that,
incident?
that
Did
you
she
can
cause an
kinda
incident? Was she escaping?
form
the
your
incident?
own
And a
backstory.
variety of different background choices which we feed into it, a little bit like the way that Commander Shepard in Mass Effect has a series of background choices, although ours is slightly more complicated. But that means that when she approaches people in Seattle, they may have heard of her and they may have some idea
Really bad
what
at
she did.
not
and that
blocking people's
Can
faces.
be a scary legend, or it can give you a bit more nuance to it. I like to think of her as the Wild West movies where the gunslinger comes to town and people know the reputation and that makes them approach things in a very different way when they suddenly realize who they're up against. And that is the weightiness of the character we're dumping into Seattle's society. So the background, this unreliable narration, as you said, it's left for the player to hint at, but the decisions that the player makes about Fire's background will be reflected by other characters in the game, and that might affect them differently if they have a particular opinion about that.
I mean, it's very
This is
interesting.
all very kind of
referring to
roundabout talking now, I
the
feel.
Gunslinger coming to town. The legend is built because of distance in those kinds of scenarios. The stories don't reach each town accurately. Here you're playing with time. If you're hundreds of years old, there's very few people that can confirm or deny what you've done. And so as you make these decisions, as we move towards the end of the game, will they come together to produce different endings?
Yes, I think it's fair to say that the choices you make for
Multiple
characters,
endings is always such
the
a
way
touchy
that you
subject.
portray Fire, the
There's
way that
never
you
as many
behave
endings as anyone
around
would
other
want.
people.
It depends on everything you've done.
The story ends in different ways, and obviously I don't want to spoiler any of those. But the way that you affect Seattle long term, and what will become of some of the characters if you left them alive, because you might not, will change the story of Seattle going on from that point.
I did say that there'd be sneak peeks. They did say there'd be previews. So I will say, in Vampire the Masquerade, there are things that are much worse than death. And in this game, there will be those options. I have to ask, can players expect a yellow taxi?
Oh, we're more about Uber these days. But you don't get a lot of taxis around in Seattle that are
Okay.
Come on, he's
yellow in the
asking about
middle of a
Kane.
snowstorm, but let's wait and see.
Well, there's been a coffin
wasn't a very
full
good
of
answer.
reveals this evening. And very, very soon, we will be back revealing the playable clans in Bloodlines 2. Very happy you could join me tonight, Ian. very happy to be able to give this information to the community. Any last words?
I just want to say that at the Chinese room, we're really looking forward to you meeting our characters, spending a bit of time with them, and seeing how your story
I hope the characters end up
develops in
interesting.
Seattle.
And I hope the dialogue ends up fun, like it was in Bloodlines 1. That was one of the best things about it, just how fucking fun the dialogue was. So, I don't know. I like a bunch of ideas they talked about in this. I like the elder. I like having a voice in your head, another character to bounce ideas off and sort of argue and decide who you're going to be. I like the fact that you can sort of shape your own backstory. That sounds interesting. In terms of what they actually showed, I can't say I'm terribly impressed. It is all pre-alpha or alpha footage, but it's, you know, just didn't look like the most exciting thing. They have also so far announced 2 playable clans, Tremere and Bruja. These videos are not, I don't know, they're not particularly interesting, I find, in terms of what they actually show. I'll just show one of them here because it's just all combat for your clan, which is like the least interesting part of Vampire the Masquerade. And they don't show very much at all. So yeah, those are all just kind of whatever so far. I would expect probably the same clans that they had announced for the last iteration of Bloodlines 2, or the same ones that were in the first Bloodlines. It would be cool to see different clans like La Sombra, but I'm not sure about that. They will probably go with what's familiar. But yeah, that's it. I wish they had gotten a little bit more into the role-playing aspect of it, but I said I would make a video on this, and now I have. So let me know what you think so far. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. If you want more, go watch my original review of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines or another of my videos.